Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. If I had said it before, then let me say it now. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2023 and welcome back to Backlook Cinema, the podcast. I'm your host, Zoe. That's Z-O or Z to the O if you're outside of the U.S. Taking a look back at the movies of yesteryear. How long can we say Happy New Year after January 1st? It's probably too late. Maybe 2 weeks is the cutoff. I don't know. Hit me up and let me know. It's the 101st episode. Thank you for downloading or streaming. We really appreciate it. We watched movies that I loved when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. If you like the show, then rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser.com, or your favorite podcast app. Finally, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and Mastodon. You can find the details in the show notes. Now, I just want to say first, before I really get started, that this show is actually being recorded in 2023. The previous episode, Terminator 2, was actually recorded before Christmas. That's why it doesn't have like the New Year's vibe in that episode. It was hard for me to act like we were actually in a new year. I wasn't thinking like in the future tense when I recorded that episode. So this episode is where you're getting all the New Year feels because it's actually being recorded in the new year. So that's where all that's coming from. So if you didn't get the vibe last episode, you're getting plenty of it now. And if you're like consuming media and you're on social media and you're listening to other shows and podcasts, you already got a lot of people telling you Happy New Year already. And here I am, Johnny come lately, with the New Year's greeting. I don't know what to say. Sorry about that. So anyway, let's go on to the opening credits and talk about the movie that I watched with Zachary, my son. So the movie we watched was The Shawshank Redemption. It's one of my favorite movies that I loved when I was growing up. Funny, being one of my favorite movies, I think this is only the second time that I watched it. And even the first time that I watched it, I hadn't seen like the entire movie. I think I missed like the first 5 or 10 minutes because I think I saw it in the movie theater and I was in the lobby messing around and got inside the theater late. It's like, one of those deals. So this is actually my first time watching it, the entirety of the film, all the way through, without missing the first like few minutes of the movie. So, The Shawshank Redemption is one of the many films based on the writings of one Stephen King. This particular film is based on the novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. It follows the life of convicted murderer Andy Dufresne, his friendship with fellow inmate Ellis Boyd Redding, and his trials and tribulations, being attacked by other prisoners, beaten by the guards, and enslaved by the warden, all while serving 2 life sentences in the Shawshank State Prison. This movie was released October 14th, 1994, produced by Castle Rock Entertainment. It grossed over $28 million in the U.S. and Canada, and on a $25 million budget. It had stellar reviews and 7 Oscar nominations. And I kind of wanted to point that out because the thing is, as good as a movie that it is, and as many people like it, it didn't like get the Oscar nominations. Well, it got the nominations, but it didn't get any Oscar wins. And you would expect a movie like this, and the way people talk about it, to have lots of Oscar love, lots of at least a couple of Oscars. But this movie actually has no Oscars, and it was nominated for, let's see, it had 7 Oscar nominations: Best Picture, Best Actor in a Leading Role for Morgan Freeman, Best Writing, Screenplay based on material previously produced or published, Best Cinematography for Roger Deakins, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score. And those are all great, but it had stiff competition. It was running against Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction, among other great movies that came out in 1994. So it was kind of rough, but it's still, uh, as far as you know, in my reckoning, it's one of the best movies ever made. And it's got some of the highest critic scores on the aggregated sites, and we'll get into that when we talk about the what the critics thought later on in the show. But first, let me tell you who is starring in the movie. First, we have Tim Robbins as Andy Dufresne. He's been in Mystic River, High Fidelity, Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, and World of Worlds from 2005. Strangely enough, you would think that he'd be in more high profile projects, especially for his performance in this movie. This movie was this movie being The Shawshank Redemption, because this is relatively earlier in his career. But not so much. You don't really see Tim Robbins in a lot of, at least not in a lot of, like studio or studio movies that's been sent to theaters. You see him a lot on television, and you see him a lot on TV movies or cable movies or Netflix movies or something. But you don't really see a lot of throughout the theatrical releases from Tim Robbins, and I find that mildly surprising. Unlike the next star, Morgan Freeman, who's been in a ton of movies. He stars as Ellis Boyd, aka Red, last name Redding. He's been in he's going to be appearing in a movie called A Good Person in March. And I wanted to talk about some of the projects that he's going to be in, since, a lot of people know many of the projects that he has appeared in already. So I seen the trailer for A Good Person, and it looks like a good movie. And it has Morgan Freeman and Florence Pugh, who I have a strange infatuation with. I really like watching her on film, although I haven't seen all of her movies. Not even Florence Pugh can make me watch Little Women or a horror movie. So I don't know. Maybe I will overcome my preconceived notions and prejudices, and perhaps I will explore those movies. But the first time I seen her was in Black Widow, and I was super impressed with her performance in that movie. So also Morgan Freeman will be in a movie called Muti. I believe that's how it's pronounced. It's completed. I don't know what the release date will be. And another movie called 57 Seconds, which is in post-production. Up next is Bob Gunton. He's playing Warden Samuel Norton. He's been in Ghostbusters Afterlife as Egon Spangler. So some of the body appearances of Egon Spangler is actually being played by Bob Gunton. He's also been in The Gettysburg Address and The Inheritance. Oh, actually, he's going to be in those movies. Both of these movies are in post-production, The Gettysburg Address and The Inheritance. He's a great character actor. Again, another actor that's been in a ton of movies. Up next is William Sadler. He played Haywood. He's been in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, Die Hard 2, and The Mist. So he's kind of you probably recognize him as a very hard looking person. Like you see his face, like that's a hard man right there. And that's where you probably recognize her from. He was the main villain in Die Hard 2. Up next is Clancy Brown. He played Captain Byron Hadley. And many people, including Zachary, actually Zachary just found out when I told him about it when we watched the movie, that he is a longtime performer as the voice of Mr. Crab on SpongeBob SquarePants. He's also been in Audrey's Children, and he will be appearing in Gen V. That's a spinoff of the Boys TV series from Amazon. And he will be appearing in John Wick Chapter 4. So Clancy Brown, I think probably the first time I saw him was in the movie Highlander. He's always had an impactful performance whenever he's on film. He's the it man, when you need a strong character actor, he's definitely down to clown. Up next is Gil Bellows. He plays Tommy Williams. He's been in Ally McBeal and American Gods. Mark Rolston played Boggs Diamond. He's been in Aliens, Rush Hour, The Departed, Young Justice, and Injustice as Lex Luthor. Young Justice being the TV show and Injustice being the video game series. And he's the voice of Lex Luthor. So he's such a strong voice for Lex Luthor that a lot of people associate him with being Lex Luthor. Yeah, he spent a significant amount of time voicing Lex Luthor. And lastly, we have James Whitmore. He plays Brooke Haitlin. He's his movie, this is an older gentleman, so his movie career is so early that I am not familiar with any of his movies, but he's been in Give 'Em Hell, Harry in 1975, Battleground in 1949, and The Asphalt Jungle from 1950. So this is a stellar cast right here. This movie was directed by Frank Darabont. He's also directed The Green Mile, The Majestic, and The Mist. All of these were fairly good movies, and The Shawshank Redemption was actually his first movie. And being his first movie, being a novice director, it kind of caused some problems. It's not that he knew what he wanted, and he brought about an effective movie. And I think that some of the credit probably goes to the editor also, but it's impressive nonetheless that this is his first movie. But like I said, he had problems with the actors. You know, he had, like Morgan Freeman, for example, had issues with how many takes this dude was doing. He was shooting like 18-hour days, and it really took him a long time to shoot some scenes. And he also had issues. He and the cinematographer Roger Deakins had butted heads on certain details of the movie. And this is because Frank Darabont is a brand new director and he's learning on the job. And the actors and everybody, the cinematographer, the editor, everybody has to, I guess, be patient with him as he tries, as he learns how to be a director. The screenplay was also by Frank Darabont. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, this movie was based on Stephen King's novella, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. And I mentioned it later on in the trivia, but Stephen King was impressed with Darabont and was glad that Darabont was directing this movie. Darabont also wrote The Mist, The Green Mile, and he's a creator and writer of The Walking Dead. So if you're listening to this and you knew about Frank Darabont, this is probably why you know him, because you've been watching The Walking Dead, and that's why. So the music is by Thomas Newman. He has 124 composer credits to his name. He's also made or composed music for 1917, A Man Called Otto, which is upcoming. It's an upcoming Tom Hanks movie. Finding Dory, and Spectre, the 007 project. And that's it for the opening credits. Now, if you're enjoying the show, remember that you can get t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, face masks, jerseys, and more at our website, backclickcinema.com/shop. And hopefully some new designs are coming. I've got a little bit more time. Now all I have to do is learn how to, what's the word I'm looking for? Organize my time, I guess, so I can push out some fly designs. I'm actually working on designs. It's just taking me forever to put it out, but more designs are coming. So up next, we're going to talk about our favorite parts. And we're back. So I want to talk about some of our favorite parts of the movie. And when I mean our, I mean me and Zachary. We watched this movie together. And one of the things that Zachary had taken away from the movies is that he has seen a lot of these in memes from other TV shows. I think he mentioned The Family Guy, and I think he mentioned Robot Chicken had did some uh what do you call them, parodies of the Shawshank Redemption, and I'm pretty sure there are plenty of other properties that have explored the Shawshank Redemption, and so I can see how like as far as the twist is concerned, there's a twist in the movie. That's one of my favorite parts. It's not something that he was surprised by. He wasn't surprised by the twist because he had seen elements of this movie before, so there's no way that he could have missed it. And as a matter of fact, it's hard for anybody to not know the twist for a 30-year-old movie, especially since it plays on TV constantly. It plays on TV the same way Law and Order plays on TV, but at least with Law and Order, you get different episodes and you have different series. You got Law and Order, you got Law and Order Criminal Intent, you got Law and Order, what was that other one? Los Angeles, I think it was called. Lost Law and Order SVU. You got a plethora, you got a cornucopia of Law and Order that you can watch, but only one, The Shawshank Redemption, which seemed to play on a loop on certain TV stations. So if you're flipping through the channels, you're going to catch a scene or two from that movie. And so it'd be kind of hard not to know what the twist was. And if you've been listening to the show, you know that we because the movies we talk about are so old that it's going to get into spoilers and whatnot. So yeah, spoiler warning, I guess. So anyways, one of my favorite scenes was the very beginning of the movie because I missed it. So I had a newfound appreciation for it. So this was the court case where Andy Dufresne is actually on trial for the murder of his wife and her lover. So he found out that his wife was cheating on him and his marriage wasn't really working, or at least it was on the rocks or whatever. And so she started stepping out of the marriage. And the narrative that the court had built up was that he was a jealous husband. He followed his wife to the secret meeting place that she was having with her lover. And this was like after they had an argument and she left. And so he followed her. Well, the narrative is that he followed her there. He waited in his car, then he stepped out of his car and he shot her, and then he dumped the gun. And and so they don't have any real evidence. The only evidence they have is circumstantial evidence, and he never confessed to her murder. So the way that it's portrayed, and they even show flashbacks of him at the house and with his wife with the other man, and then him at that man's house. He's in his car outside of that house. He's playing with his revolver and he's thinking about using the gun. It's like we don't know if he's going to use the gun on himself or on the couple or on everybody. Like if he was just going to kill everybody, you don't know what he's going to do. But in the court case, they're claiming that he had not only shot him, but reloaded his gun and shot him up again. So as far as the judge was concerned, this was particularly heinous. It goes past being a crime of passion when you have to reload your weapon and shoot them some more. But from my perspective, the most passionate thing that you can do is shoot somebody till the gun goes empty and then reload your gun and then shoot them some more. I don't think that was particularly heinous. That's somebody that's emotionally distraught in that particular situation. But anyway, because of how heinous the judge thought it was, he gave Andy Dufresne 2 life sentences. So that was a fascinating thing that I liked how they did. I like how they kept his innocence ambiguous because he doesn't have the manner of a murderer. He's not like Raven mad. He doesn't have a mean demeanor. He's very calm, and I guess some people might describe him as stoic. He didn't have any emotional outbursts. or anything that was typical of a man either who was guilty or even of a man who was falsely accused of murder. And that, I don't know if that helped him or hurt him being so calm. There was one particular exchange and where the prosecutor was saying something like, well, don't you think it's kind of convenient that your weapon, the revolver used to that you used to murder your wife can't be found? Like, because what the prosecutor was insinuating was that because they can't find the revolver that was used to murder his wife, then they can't match the shell casings or the rounds that they found to his particular revolver. But Andy Dufresne replies, well, it's actually unfortunate that you can't find a weapon because that's the very thing that could prove my innocence, right? So not only can they prove that this weapon was not that the bullets and the guns don't match, or the gun didn't match, but they can also probably show that the gun had never been fired. But he had thrown the weapon away, and so he had thrown away any evidence that he was innocent. But they leave it. We don't actually know, as the audience, we don't know. He could be guilty and he could be innocent. All we know is that this demure, soft-spoken man seems to be a murderer, and he is convicted and he is sent to prison. So that, I think that it was a scene that was kind of setting up what was going to follow in the movie, and kind of saying something about the criminal justice system, but not saying it out loud. It's being very I think there was a subdued message about the criminal justice system. And I think that message is, what if they get it wrong? But it's kind of hard to tell. I guess because Tim Robbins isn't portraying a man, as I said, either as a guilty man or an innocent man being accused of being guilty. He's very hard to read, and then it continues when he goes to prison, where he's a person that's very hard to read. So another of my favorite scene, and it's a scene that kind of plays out. It's like one of the themes of the movie, and it plays out several times throughout the movie. So this is Red, and he's going to his parole hearing. This is to be the first. It's probably his very first parole hearing. So he goes to the parole hearing, and they basically ask him if he felt that he's been rehabilitated, and he's very eager to try to impress upon the parole board that he has. And he says, yes, I feel like I learned a lot. I feel like I am rehabilitated. And of course his request, his rehabilitation is denied. Right. So that was, I like that scene because of the way it plays out in the movie. Like that they keep bringing it back, and it shows as he gets older, the attitude kind of changed a little bit. I will point out one of the things that the movie doesn't really point out well is kind of the passage of time. You only know that time is passing because they're telling you that time is passing, but the characters don't seem to age that much during the long time that they spend in this prison. Like the time frame covers, like, I think 20 years, maybe 30. I'm not exactly sure, but it's a good chunk of time. Maybe the characters should have grayed up a little bit. You know, they at the very least they should have had a lot more gray hairs than they were showing. But because when I first watched the movie, I don't think I realized so much time had passed. On the second viewing, that was one of the things that impressed upon me, was that how much time, the huge time frame that they had in this story. Another thing that was super impressive was like going back to the cinematographer, these huge sweeping shots of the prison. And so where it's most impressive, where you have Andy's arrival to the prison, those are all some incredibly beautiful scenes. And the outside, the exterior of the prison was shot on location. So they really took advantage of it, and it really looked great. So one of the things that had happened on Andy's arrival was they were taking bets on the new crop of prisoners that were coming in. They came in on a bus, so they were betting who was going to cry first, right? So who was going to be the one that's going to start crying and basically losing his shit on his first day of prison. So Red had bet on Andy. The other prisoners had bet on various other people. Haywood, he bet on what he called the fat pig. I guess he called him the fat pig. It was basically it was an overweight prisoner, and they didn't have money. They had cigarettes, so that's what he bet his cigarettes on. He bet his cigarettes that it was going to be this kind of short fat guy. And so and that night, but they can't just let the people alone. They can't let the new prisoners alone. So they're all of the prisoners that had been making these bets, and even the ones that weren't involved in the betting, they were all needling the newcomers, right? They're all basically teasing them and whatnot, and this is where Haywood was genius. And it's like he was talking, since the fat prisoner was near him, he was talking to the fat prisoner and basically baiting him into making him think that everything was going to be all right. But it was such a sinister way of baiting him. It was like, yeah, you're going to be all right, and you look really good. The printers, the other guys will love your fat bottom or something like that. It was kind of sinister with what he was doing. And he won the bet. The fat dude started crying. He's like, I want to get out. I want my mommy. They made a mistake. He was crying. He won the bet. And that would have been great. Unfortunately, the fat guy took it way too far, and he wouldn't shut up. So now the guards come in. And the guards are basically personified specifically by one guard in particular, played by I can't even talk anymore. Played by Clancy Brown, Captain Byron Hadley. So Captain Hadley, he's sadistic. He likes beating up on prisoners, and so he told the fat dude to stop crying in the cell. The fat dude was like, he wouldn't stop crying. He was pleading for help, and then Captain Hadley told the other guards to pull him out of his cell, and they did so, and he beat the crap out of the dude. You were just kicking him and beating him and punching him and kicking him, punching him and kicking him. He wouldn't stop. He didn't get tired. He was like the Energizer battery on this dude beating him up. And Andy didn't make a sound. Andy was like stone cold. One of the things that had made this movie special was the voiceover by Morgan Freeman. The movie is basically told from Red's point of view. He's describing except for like certain scenes where he's not in, but overall it's from his point of view. And he was talking about how he didn't think much of Andy when Andy first came into prison, but then found newfound respect for him, even though Andy cost him like 2 packs of cigarettes for not making a sound, but newfound respect for Andy later on. This leads up to another one of my favorite scenes. One of the I'll call it a cornerstone. One of the cornerstones of the movie is when Red meets Andy for the first time. They meet out in the yard, and Red is playing catch with Haywood, I think, and some of the other prisoners, just throwing the baseball around. And Andy comes across Red and says, I understand that you're a man that can get things, right? So Andy's looking for contraband, and Red says, well, yeah, I can do that. I can get you stuff. And so that's how their relationships develop. Basically, it starts off as a business relationship, but because of some of the things that Andy started doing for the prisoners, it develops more. Also, I was making all kind of notes in the movie. One of the things I noticed was that Andy's prison number is or was 37927, and Red's prison number was 30265. Is that truly important? I think I like the fact that I noticed that and I made a note of it. One of the things that Andy was doing to basically improve the circumstances of the prisoners, that kind of helped engender them to the prisoners. It's weird because he seemed like the type of person who just likes to help people, but it's also the type of, but in doing this and following his nature, he gets into trouble, or he potentially gets into trouble. So there are and one of the things that he does, and this basically well, first, but let me roll back some. Well, in the narration, Red points out that the first 2 years were the worst 2 years for Andy in the prison. Like Andy's first 2 years in the prison were the worst because he was harassed, beaten, and they imply that he had been raped by these men called the sisters, or this is what Red calls the sisters. So they show the beatings, but they don't show anything past that. But the implication is that he's raped repeatedly by these men. And at one time, and it's funny, right? Because I had not realized that this was happening the first time I watched the movie. And bear in mind, I was a fully formed adult when I watched it. So you'd think I know, but I had no idea. I was pretty dense, but now I'm older and I'm weathered. And I was like, oh my God, that's what was going on. So one time Andy asked Red, would it help if I told them that I'm not a homosexual? And Red says, they're not either. So that was kind of funny. So he doesn't actually get any real he's basically on his own. He hasn't really made any friends outside of Red, but Red's not going to come and try to fight the sisters for him. And then the other guys, like, he's friendly with, but he's not. Basically, Red has like a friend group, and so Red's friend group basically accepts Andy as an associate, but not quite a friend. Like they're friendly towards him, and they won't attack him. They won't beat him up, but they're not going to go out of their way to help him out or anything. And so when it came time, there was a lottery to pick some prisoners to work outside the prison. One of the warden's schemes was providing prison labor to do certain projects. Like, in the first project, they were re-tarring the roof of a building. So in this particular instance, Andy and Red. So Red had basically had the skills and the influence to what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? He he had influenced the lottery so that him and all of his friends got picked for this much desired detail. So he he rigged it. He rigged it so he and his friends could go. So they're all outside and they're tarring the roof. So it felt like it was nice because it felt like you almost like you're a regular person and not someone serving prison time. So they're tarring the roof, and Andy, while he's working, he overhears the captain of the guards, none other than Captain Byron Hadley. Remember Captain Hadley, the one that is not shy about beating the crap out of prisoners. So he overhears Captain Hadley complaining about receiving a windfall, like his uncle died or something like that, and he's getting this significant inheritance. In $1940, it's somewhere around $30,000, but he's upset about it because he's not going to be able to keep all of that money because of the taxes. He thinks that he'd be lucky to see like half of that. And then Andy had kind of pipes up because Andy is a banker. He's he's a financial dude. So he's a CPA, I guess. So he goes up and the first thing first, he ain't supposed to be, he's not supposed to stop working. And second, he ain't supposed to talk to the captain of the guards. He's not supposed to talk to any guards, let alone the captain of the guards. And then all this, like, not supposed to be doing any of this, he asked this weird question, like, do you trust your wife? And it's like, you really want a prisoner, like, especially a prisoner who's been convicted for murder, convicted for double murder. You want that dude to be asking about if you can trust your wife? That's it didn't rub the captain the right way. It rubbed him all the wrong way. So the captain immediately grabbed Andy and put him over to the edge of the roof and threatened to drop him. It's like, what are you talking? Why are you talking about my wife? Why are you? What smart alecky thing are you going to say? I'm going to drop you off of this roof right now for mentioning my wife. And then Andy was able to get out. You know, if you trust your wife, you can give the money to her as a gift, and you won't get taxed on it. And this gives him pause. And so the captain kind of pulls him away from the roof, and he's like, yeah, if you don't believe me, you can go and you can talk to the IRS. They will tell you the exact same thing. If you give the money to your wife as a gift, it's non-taxable and you can keep it all. And so he decides to give him a break. There was some other thing. I think that Andy had offered to set it up for him. Like, he said he would do the paperwork for him, and that if Andy was allowed to do the paperwork for the captain, then all he would ask is for some beer for his coworkers, the other prisoners. And this was like the most, this is impactful for me. It felt really good to watch this moment. It was such an impactful moment for me. So the captain decided to take a chance on this prisoner. So he went. They didn't actually show this. This is like behind the scenes or whatever, off camera, I guess is what they call it. But then the next day, you see the captain is in a much better mood, and all the prisoners sitting down on their break drinking actual beer, and this really makes Andy super popular. Now he's an actual friend of the group, and not just someone they tolerate, or not just someone who is an associate. Now he's in the friend group, right? Because they all got beers, and they all thought he was crazy. Like, when he first started breaking away from the work detail to go talk to the captain, it was like, even especially Red, what are you doing? Get back here! You ain't got no business over there. Get back here! Get back to work. But he just, and then when you look at him, he just had such a ghost, almost like a zombie demeanor, right? Like, it was like a ghostly, maybe somebody can describe it as stoic, but it was almost like he was attracted to the captain. He was going to walk over there and he was going to give him some information, and nobody was going to stop him. On one sense, it was almost pathological. In another sense, maybe it's because he has enormous balls. Andy Dufresne had giant sized steel metal balls, and he went over to talk to the captain to see if he can help. Now, I don't know what the end motivation was. Was the end motivation so that he can get in with the captain or get in with the other prisoners? That's a possibility, because after he helped out the captain. Now, remember, the captain is evil. We don't like him, but the captain had I think the captain had caught the sisters at, like, when they're back in the prison, and this is after the work detail is over, and they're back into the prison, and the sisters started harassing Andy this one time. And sometimes Andy was able to fight back, and sometimes they got the better of him. But and this one time, well, here, before I get to what happened with the captain, let me sidetrack to one of the times when the sisters were bothering Andy, and the leader, Boggs Diamond, Mark Ralston played Boggs Diamond, the man who played Lex Luthor. So naturally, anyways, Boggs told him that he was gonna unzip his fly. Whatever Boggs put in Andy's mouth, Andy was just gonna take in his mouth. And then he had this like, he had a shiv that looked a lot like an ice pick, and he had aimed it at Andy's temple. And he told Andy, and there were other prisoners around, obviously, to hold Andy down so that he couldn't really go anywhere. And he told Andy that if Andy had bitten down, then he would shove the ice pick tool into, Andy's head and kill him. To which Andy responded, "If you shove that ice pick in me, then I will definitely bite down, and it would be so intense that you will need like the fire department to remove my head from anything that you put in my mouth," right? So now Diamond, or Boggs Diamond, does not know if this is true or not. Basically, what Andy is describing is some kind of like death reaction or a reflex reaction that would happen if Diamond would have shoved this shiv into Andy's head. So would this reflex actually happen? I'm not exactly sure, but not only does Andy sound convincing, but they already know that he's intelligent. Like, he started a library, and he's helping people with their taxes. Like, later, I think is this part in the film where he's helping another prisoner with the library, and then he's helping the guards with their taxes, and he's helping build a new library. So he's doing all of these things. So they know that he's smart, and he carries himself as a very intelligent person. So Boggs doesn't know what Andy is saying is true, but he's going to take it on faith that Andy knows what he's talking about, because he doesn't want to take the chance that Andy is lying. So instead of forcing Andy to perform fellatio, he just beats the crap out of Andy, him and his gang. So I guess because he's humiliated that he can't do what he wants, I guess. I'm not exactly sure. So that was a side quest that I wanted to go on. I really like that scene. That was one of my favorite scenes. So going back to the other scene where I think that they were about to beat up Andy, and he was caught by one of the prison guards, and he was thrown into solitary confinement for, I don't know, a couple of days or weeks or whatever, for harassing Andy. Now remember, this is after Andy had helped with the taxes and everything. So after Boggs' solitary confinement, he's pulled out by the captain, Captain Hadley. Remember, he's mean and sadistic, and can't and has no qualms about abusing prisoners. And it is at that time, and he has this thing where he takes off his hat and hands it over to one of his subordinates. And he does this when he pulls Boggs out of solitary confinement. He takes off his hat and he hands it to his subordinate. And then the captain proceeds to beat the crap out of Boggs. And as evil as the captain is, we have decided that Boggs is even more evil, and we can only sit there and be like that guy on Godzilla that said, "Let them fight," and it's really not a fight because the captain is so good at beating the crap out of prisoners. The prisoners are basically defenseless against them. We've never seen a prisoner be able to put up a defense against Boggs' like relentless like fighting. And I guess it's because for some reason they don't see it coming. They don't see it coming when Captain Hadley is about to punch him, I guess. And they're caught off guard. And if the captain can get one punch in on you, then it's over. Like, the first punch is the one that knocks you down, or it's going to be the first hit with whatever object that he happens to be holding that puts you down. And so now he's going to step on you. He's going to kick you in the face, going to kick you in the stomach. It's basically over at that point. So when we see Boggs again, he's like, he wrapped up in medical stuff. Like he's got bandages all over. He's got bandage all sorts of medical wrappings all over. He's being wheeled out of the prison in a wheelchair, and he's being taken to another minimum security facility for people who are like disabled, right? So and I think Red was saying that he had to eat through a straw for the rest of his life or something like that. He was in a bad way. Really, Captain Hadley really worked him over. So that was another. It's like we're not supposed to like it, but I thoroughly enjoyed that moment in the movie. So another impactful moment was Brooks. So Brooks was the librarian that Andy was asked to help out. He wasn't really helping Brooks because Brooks was doing it. He was really proud of his work. He was really proud of being able to organize the books and giving the books and the occasional contraband to the prisoners. He had purpose. He had meaning. He loved what he did, and Andy was there to help him out. But then I guess Brooks got something that he wasn't expecting. Brooks is an older prisoner. He had been in Shawshank for 50 years, and he's like in his 60s now. And he had got what he had not expected. He got his parole. Now, I'm not exactly sure if it was parole or if his sentence was just up. But there's a scene where he has Haywood by the neck. He has a shiv against Haywood's neck. And he's like, it's not just against his neck. It's like he's digging the tip of the shiv into Haywood's neck. And it's like he really wants to kill Haywood. And he's like he's incensed about it. It's not, and this is not. So the other prisoners come. The guards aren't there yet, but the other prisoners come and they try to talk him down. And it's like, please, no, don't do it. You don't want to kill Haywood. You know, stop. It's like, and it's not anything that Haywood did. Even Haywood said that all he did was come in there, and all of a sudden, Brooks grabbed him and put the shiv to Haywood's neck, and it's like you don't know what's going on, and come to find out, Haywood does not want to leave the prison. He's been granted release from prison, but he doesn't want to go because inside the prison he has value, he has purpose, and outside he doesn't know what's outside, but he knows that outside he doesn't have value, he doesn't have purpose. The problem with I don't know if it's all the prisoners, but with Haywood, I'm not Haywood, but with Brooks in particular, he doesn't have a family. He doesn't have a support system outside. Nobody was writing him from the outside. There's nobody outside of the prison that loved him. So when he walks out the prison, he walks out alone. He's in a suit that I guess he was arrested in, and I think he had a briefcase. The state had set him up with a job and a kind of halfway house for newly released or paroled prisoners, and he's trying to fit into the real world. But he's been in this movie takes place in I want to say it starts around the 1930s. I think that's the beginning time period. I'm not exactly sure, but Haywood says that when he's released, and the story takes place in Maine. So when he's released from prison and he goes to like a small town, he's bewildered by the progress that civilization has made. And in a letter, I think he has his own voiceover, and in the voiceover he's dictating a letter to the audience. So it's a letter that he writes to his friends at Shawshank. So he's in one comment he says that he had seen an automobile as a child once, It was so long ago since he's been outside of the prison, and now there are cars everywhere. And he comments that things are just moving so fast and people in a hurry. He mentions that he's set up as a bagger at a supermarket, or I don't even know if there's supermarkets. Maybe we'll just call it the market. And and he's the grocery store. That's a better term for it. And he talks about how he doesn't think his manager likes him because he's an old man. He has arthritis in his fingers. He doesn't know anything out here. He doesn't have a purpose out here except for bagging groceries. And the last words of his letter, he says, I don't like it out here. I don't think I'm going to stay. Now, what some prisoners do, what some people do, if they really want to get into prison, is that they will commit another crime that will get them back into prison. But what Brooks does is that he commits suicide. Before he does, he carves his name in the halfway house where he was set up. He carves Brooks was here, and then he commits suicide. And this is like the last words of his letter that said that he doesn't like it here. He doesn't want to stay here anymore. And that is those were the last words that were read by the prisoners. And they knew by reading these words that Brooks had committed suicide. So I think, and this is like a small, like a side story that I think that's one of the things I like about Stephen King stories in general, especially when you bring it to film and it's well done, because a lot of it is a collection of short stories that are interconnected and woven together into a larger narrative. And that's what I love about the way Stephen King writes stories. And that's what I love about when a Stephen King movie is done extremely well. And this is one of those well done movies. And so that was Brooks' story, and it strongly affected the other, his friend group in the prison. And also, a funny thing that happened was in the letter he said he apologized to Haywood, and he said, I'll tell Haywood I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, right? And so that was touching. So one of my other favorite parts in the movie is that Andy had been writing to the state for 2 years to get more funds so that he could basically create a prison library. So after the first 2 years of writing, they gave the prison $200 that Andy was allowed to use to start for more books, for records, for a record player, for these things, for magazines, for things to beef up the library. And because he was helping the warden out, the warden was happy to let him do it. And then he continued to write letters, and then they gave him they gave the prison like a continuous budget, so they would constantly give the prison money because Andy Dufresne was writing them so much. So they use it to renovate the library and get way more books and materials and whatnot. And so one of the things they got, like I said, was a record player. They got all these records. And one of the things that happened was that Andy had one prison guard that was watching him, because at this point he was all trustworthy and whatnot. All the prison guard basically liked Andy because he was doing their taxes for free, and they had a better outcome with him doing their taxes than if they were to do it themselves or if they had to pay somebody else to do it. So he had all this new stuff that had showed up for the prison, and this stuff had to be cleaned up from this particular area, and this stuff had to be put away. And so the guard says, you get this stuff cleaned up. I'm going to the bathroom, and it got to be cleaned up before I get back. So the guard goes to the bathroom. And so Andy looks around and he gets his idea. So he locks the guard in the bathroom, and then he takes one of these records and he puts it on the record player. It's a classical opera. I can't remember who had did it. I don't know, it's Beethoven or Amadeus or somebody. I can't remember. But anyways, he starts playing this opera, and he plays it over the PA system because I think they're in one of the warden's offices. So he plays this over the PA system so the entire prison can hear this opera playing, and they're all transfixed by this beautiful music that's coming over the loudspeakers. And the warden is shocked that he's hearing this music and like, what's going on? And so Andy Dufresne not only locked the guard in the bathroom, but they have locks on the outside of bathrooms. Anyways, he also locked the office door. And so when the warden came and Captain Hadley came and some other guards, they're like, Andy, you open this door. Andy, you open this door right now. Andy, don't make me come and get you. You open this door right now. And instead, Andy just leaned over and turned up the opera music so it was even louder over the PA system. And he just sat back in his chair. He put his feet on his desk. And he had this pleased smile on his face. And so finally, Captain Hadley took his stick and they broke the window, got into the office, and they put Andy into solitary confinement for a couple of days for just being a smart aleck, I guess. So another impactful moment was they had a new prisoner come in. The prisoner's Tommy Williams. Tommy Williams is he's eager to, I guess, try to change up his image. He talks a lot, so he brags about he's a younger kid. He brags about the crimes he's committed and all this stuff and trouble that he would get into with the cops and whatnot. Now the other prisoners don't acknowledge that they've ever committed a crime. So when he asks Andy what Andy was in for, Andy told him, "Don't you know? There's no everybody in here is innocent." The only person that's in the prison that actually admits to his crime is Red. Red would say to Andy early in the movie that he was the only guilty person in Shawshank. So this guy Tommy, he's he's had a lot of experience with crime, being locked up, but he kind of wants to change. He's not going to be in prison for very long, so he decides that he wants to do some improvement. So he asked Andy to help him get his GED. So Andy's like the taskmaster. He's gonna take Tommy on his wing. He's gonna teach him, and it's like this montage of Tommy basically in being tutored by Andy to get basic education so he can get his GED. So all this is going on, and there's a conversation about like I said, he asked Andy what he's in for. Andy doesn't tell him. He just says that they were all innocent. And then finally it gets around to Tommy that Andy was convicted of killing his wife and her lover. And Andy is not Andy, but Tommy is shocked. And Andy's not there when conversation is happening, but I think Tommy is talking to Red. Tommy's shocked because he knows this story. He knows the story not because of newspapers or he heard it over the radio. He knows the story because another prisoner that he was in prison with had bragged about killing a man and his lover, and that murder was pinned on the woman's banker husband. And Andy was a banker. And Tommy realized that Andy may really actually be an innocent person, and he was a witness. So he knows this prisoner. This prisoner wasn't in jail for murdering for that particular murder. He was in prison for murdering somebody else. But he was the type of person that liked to talk about, like he and Tommy were similar and how they like to talk about their crimes. But this dude did way worse crime than Tommy ever did. So like this dude was like constantly murdering people, and he liked to talk about his murders or whatnot. So when Andy hears about it, Andy goes to the warden. It's like, this guy might prove my innocence. I could get out. The warden, for the main reason that he is corrupt, he has this extortion going on. He's using his prisoner workforce to extort money from other contractors. So if the contractors would not give him, outside contractors, so if you were in landscaping, or if you were in construction or something like that, if there's anything that his prisoners could do, then he would bid for that particular contract. So what the contractors would do is that they would give the warden money so that he would not pursue those contracts. So that's how he was extorting other contractors. So he was making thousands of dollars off of this prison labor, and plus he was taking some off the top, and he was doing his finances for him. He created a fake identity and everything for the warden, so that even if they trace, if anything came under investigation and they started to trace this corruption, they would end up tracing it not to the warden or to Andy, but they would trace it to a fictional human that Andy had created. With Andy's knew how to create a fake person. He created with a social security number, a birth certificate, a home address, and everything that a person would need in the 30s or 40s to prove their identity. Andy was able to create that from prison on behest of the warden, who was doing all sorts of corrupt stuff to enrich himself. A word on the warden. He was what some people would describe as a Bible thumper, right? So he's always talking about the passages from the Bible. He tested Andy on scripture one time. He's constantly talking about what a pious man he is, and when he's supposed to be instantly unlikable. And the way they do this is they make him into the worst type of Christian, somebody who talks about piety but who is corrupt to the core. This dude is a thief and a liar, basically. So Andy is doing this work for him. Andy knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing is corrupt anything, but he's basically in a situation where he knows that he has the privileges that he has because he's helping the warden, and he really doesn't have a choice. He could either do this work for the warden, or he could be given the worst prison details and be treated badly and lose whatever protection that the guards might be giving him from other prisoners. So the warden doesn't want to let him go because there's nobody else can do this work. There's no other prisoner that can cook the books for him. Only Andy can do this. So he pours cold water on Andy's aspiration of getting a new trial and using Tommy as a witness. And Andy is he's a little upset. He's like, how can you be so obtuse? Right? He used this word. And I don't think that the warden knows what that word means, because he says something like, what did you call me? He doesn't know or understand. But he decided that he's insulted now, and he puts Andy in solitary confinement for a month. And then after confronting Andy again, he leaves him in there for another month. And this is all in service of discouraging Andy from trying to prove his innocence. And he knows Andy is smart enough. He can't leave him in solitary confinement forever, because he still needs Andy to cook the books for him. And he also knows that Andy is smart enough to start writing letters to lawyers or something. He can contact somebody on the outside to help him prove his innocence. So the warden's real problem is Tommy Williams. Tommy Williams is the witness, and he's not going to be in prison for long. He's probably only going to be in prison for a couple of years, but he can't take the chance that Tommy is going to be used as a witness. So first he asks Tommy, basically he gets Tommy to meet him outside. So the guards bring Tommy to the outside of the prison. Well, basically in the yard of the prison, not outside, but in the prison yard. And he's basically, the warden's kind of filling him up. He's trying to figure out if Tommy would really testify on Andy's behalf. After Tommy acknowledges that he would testify for Andy, then the warden walks away. He kind of gives a signal. He walks away. There you have Captain Hadley with this rifle with a scope on it, and he shoots Tommy several times. He kills Tommy. Because Tommy could be a witness that could bring down the entire warden criminal empire. So that was kind of messed up. But I like how all of that was set up. I liked how the story led to that point. The thing that makes that particularly tragic is that Andy finds out through solitary confinement that Tommy did get his GED. He passed with a C average, which is good enough, especially for Tommy. But now Tommy's not alive to appreciate it. As a matter of fact, when Tommy gets it, I don't think he actually ever learns that he passed, because he gets the letter and then he balls it up, and I think he throws it in the trash, and the other prisoners had reached it. And I don't think the audience finds out until one of the guards come and he tells Andy through the solitary confinement bars that Tommy passed. So that was cool setup. I just, like I said, one of my favorite parts. Another of my favorite parts. Basically, Red is going up for his promotion. This is like the third time we see this scene, and Red basically has an attitude that he doesn't care about what they're going to do to him, because he says rehabilitation is a made-up word. It's just something that they made up so that you people can have a job and you can stamp your paperwork. So you do what you need to do, and I don't care anymore. It's a wonderful speech. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And so he actually gets his release. He gets released from prison. But I think what's most impactful about this part is that Red sees himself as Brooks. He's not been in prison as long as Brooks has, but he has been, as what he puts it, institutionalized. The other prisoners don't believe that a person would reject freedom, because when they see that, like, Brooks is on the outside, they think that he's living a great life. He's outside of prison, but they haven't been in prison for as long as Brooks has been, or as long as Red has been. So he tries to tell him that it's because you've been institutionalized. When Brooks was in the prison, he was somebody, but on the outside, he was not anybody. And Red is kind of in that same boat. He doesn't have a family on the outside of prison. The only people he know are inside. He knows how to function in prison. He's the man that can get you things, but on the outside, if you wanted something, all you needed was yellow pages. So he sees him. He doesn't have anything on the outside. So he doesn't. He's not comfortable on the outside. Another thing that happened is that Andy has a meeting. He has a strange meeting with Red. He tells Red an interesting tale. He tells Red that if Red ever gets out of prison, and this is Tommy's death actually is the thing that kind of drove Andy over the edge and put things in motion in Andy's mind. So one of the things he does, he tells Red that if he ever gets out of prison, he wants Red to go to a particular tree on this particular plot of land in Maine. It's kind of vague how he describes it, so I don't know how Red is supposed to find it, but we just got to take for granted that it's good enough for Red. And then he said under a particular stone, there's something that he left for Red. And then he asked another prisoner for a length of rope. And now Red is worried that Andy's going to kill himself. And he said it was the longest night in his life, because he has a length of rope and he's acting strange, and the guy that could get him off, that could prove his innocent, had just been killed. And I think everybody suspects it was murder, because they tried to say that he was killed trying to escape from prison. that there was really no reason for him to try to escape from prison because he had kind of adapted to life in prison. He doesn't have a history of trying to escape from prison, so it was weird that he would be killed trying to escape. So nobody really believes it, but that's the story that the warden is going with. That night, Ed is worried about Andy. And when they wake up and all the prisoners have to come in front of their cells, Andy does not come in front of his cell. And Red is thinking that, and like some of the other prisoners thinking that Andy had committed suicide. And so, the guards are really upset. It's like they start accusing Andy of playing games or being difficult, right? They think he's being difficult. So they go to his cell and he's not there in the cell. And Red is shocked and relieved. It's not that Andy is dead. Andy isn't even in his cell. And so they start going around. They start questioning prisoners. The guards start losing their collective shit. So they toss the cell, and the warden comes, and the warden is threatening the guards that they need to find Andy. It's like, how could he have disappeared? Just, what are you trying to tell me? He just up and left like a fart in the wind, and he's angry, and he starts throwing these stones at Andy. Like to sculpt stones. The warden grabs these tiny sculptures, starts throwing them around the cell, and he throws them at a poster of Rita Hayworth, and there's a hole in the poster. No, it wasn't Rita Hayworth. It was somebody else. Anyways, because Rita Hayworth was the first poster. The second poster was Marilyn Monroe, and then there was a third poster, and I think I have a comment about that in the trivia. So and it's a woman dressed as a primitive cave woman from a movie. I think it's called 10,000 BC. So he throws a rock and it hits the poster, and it's a hole in the poster, and there's a breeze coming through, and then he rips the poster off the wall, and there's a circular hole, a tunnel that goes all the way down. So this tunnel goes all the way. It goes a significant distance. And then they do like a flashback sequence of what happened. And I think it's Red with his narrative. And this is why Morgan Freeman is so great at narrating what happens in the movie, why it was so necessary for his narration. So as a matter of fact, I think that I don't know if I have it in the trivia or not, but what happened is that the director, Frank Darabont, he had inspiration, a lot of inspiration, since he watched this movie dozens of times. He watched Goodfellas, and so in watching Goodfellas, he was impressed with how they use narration, and there were other things that he had taken from that movie. So that's what he wanted to do in the Shawshank Redemption, and that's why Morgan Freeman sounds so great doing this narration. So early in the movie, the first thing that Andy had asked for was a rock hammer. So it's basically a really small chisel with a handle on it, and it's used for shaping rocks. Like if a sculpture, he used it to shape and sculpt rocks. So he said that he was going to use it to like shape chess pieces and checkers pieces and little statues. He had all these little statues around his cell that he had sculpted. What he had discovered when he was using the rock hammer to carve his name or something, he was carving something into the wall. A huge chunk of the wall had came off in his cell, and he started tapping with the rock hammer. And for whatever reason, they decided to build this prison with some kind of soft material. It was not as hard as concrete. You would expect all the prisons to be built with concrete, but apparently this prison was not, or it was not. It was built with an inferior concrete. Whatever this back wall is made of, it was not reinforced, so he could literally dig with this tiny little rock hammer. It was basically a tiny little chisel. Apparently, it took him 24 years to dig this enormous tunnel Yeah, it was long and it was comically straight. It was one of the things that Stephen King had commented about the tunnel was that it was comically circular. Like it could it didn't have to be so circular, and that was the only note that Stephen King had for the film. Otherwise, he really liked the film and what they did with the story. That was his only note, that the whole was comically circular, and it was. And so Andy had taken 27 years to dig this tunnel out of a cell using the poster to cover up the tunnel, and then it would lead him to um like a kind of an industrial area of the prison where there were lots of pipes. So I don't know, I can't really tell. Maybe he was outside at that point. It's kind of hard to tell. But anyways, he was in a section of an area of the prison where there were lots of pipes, and apparently he found out what the pipes were for, and what they where they led. So one of the pipes was a sewage pipe, and one of the best lines in the movie, I didn't write it down, but one of the best lines is when Red says something like he had crawled through 500 yards of foul smelling shit that I can't even imagine, or maybe I just don't want to, right? So Andy had bust a hole in the sewage pipe. He crawled in. He actually had this whole thing had planned out. He had stolen the warden's shoes. He had stolen the warden's suit because he was that kind of a confidant that he could get that close to the warden. He had put it in a plastic bag. He had tied the bag. That's what he needed the rope for. He needed the rope to tie this plastic bag to his leg so he didn't have to carry the bag. And when he crawled to the pipe, he didn't have to carry the bag as he crawled to the pipe. He would just drag it with his leg. And he crawled through 500 miles of the sewage pipe and ending out in a river or something like, or I don't know what it was. It was an area. It was raining, so the area was like flooded with water. So I don't know if it was a creek or a river or just like it was probably a creek of some kind. So then he crawls out and he raises on, and it's iconic scene that every time they talk about the Shawshank Redemption, they'll show the scene of Andy raising his hands to the rain coming down, washing the crap off of him, and basically symbolizing his freedom. He had his plastic bag, and there's a scene that they show. They use it on many of the posters of the Shawshank Redemption. So it's an iconic moment for the film. And then after this happens, Red gets out, and he's basically in the same situation as Brooks is. And interesting enough, nobody has family. Brooks doesn't have a family, or didn't have a family. Red didn't have a family. Probably because, well, we'll get into that later on. But and Andy, for some reason, doesn't have a family. But now he's an escaped convict, so it's not like he could have gone back to his family if he wanted to. But what he did do, since he created the identity that he used for the warden, he had all the credentials to get all of the warden's money out of the banks that he was laundering. So he could withdraw all of these accounts. He went to like 6 or 7 different banks, withdrawing all of the money that he had helped the warden put into the banks, using the identity that he created for the warden. And then with his money, he went to Mexico, where he told Red that he was going. And then when Red got out, he was contemplating what Andy told him. So he decided to go and try to find the thing that Andy had pointed him out to. And he had found it. And it was under a lava rock that's not supposed to be in Maine. And it was like a tin full of hundreds of dollars and 2 bus tickets. And he's inviting Andy to come to Mexico with him. And I think the thing that makes this powerful is that the reason Andy didn't have the same experience as Brooks, for one, Andy wasn't in as long as Brooks, and so he wasn't quite as institutionalized. And for the second thing is that he had a plan. He had a plan for what he wanted to do after he got out of prison. Brooks didn't have a plan. Brooks was just out, and he didn't have anything anymore. Red was the same situation. Red didn't have a plan. He was out, didn't have anything. There was no one he could go to. He didn't have a plan. He considered himself a nobody out of prison. He didn't know anything. He didn't know anybody. He didn't have any skills because he's been in the prison since he was a child. And it's not like the prison had like a work program where he could learn a trade or he could get a higher education, or maybe he wasn't interested in like taking college courses. I don't know if they had college courses for prisoners back then, but it's like he didn't have any skills. It's nothing that he could do. It's nothing he could contribute. He was basically just someone on the outside that was taking up space. But Andy had a plan. And so when Red thought about Andy, Red basically had a plan now. He had something to live for now. It was something that he could do. Going and looking for the thing that Andy had pointed him out to in some field in Maine, that gave Red something to do. And then when Red decided to go and follow Andy to Mexico, when he took the money and the bus tickets, and he got on the bus, and he's gonna violate his parole, but he doesn't think that anybody's gonna be looking for an old crook like him. And he basically takes the bus to begin his journey from Maine to Mexico. So it gave him something to do. Now, there was some talk that they was going to like leave the movie a little bit ambiguous, that they was going to just end the movie with Red on the bus. But one of the producers decided, because at this point you don't actually see what happened to Andy, only that Andy walked out of a bank and you don't see him after that. One of the producers that fought the hardest to get Castle Rock to make this movie, she was thinking that no, we want to see that last scene. We want to see them get together. So, so the director Darabont was against it, but he shot it in such a way that kind of satisfied him and satisfied what the producer wanted for this movie. So that's when you have the reunion with Andy and Red. But it's shot from like far away, so it's not, up close and intimate. And he cut a lot of the dialogue from that final scene. But it was, I really liked that shot. The audience liked it. I liked it. And Frank Darabont changed his mind when he got the audience reaction from it. But that's a powerful movie. I didn't mean to just tell the whole tale of the movie. I just meant to talk about my favorite parts. But that's what happens sometimes, because the movie is so powerful and I got so much from it. And it's one of those movies that you can glean a little more from it when you watch it more. But it's just so beautifully shot. And so you can see why they play it on TV all the time. And such excellent dialogue and such outstanding acting. You gotta, it's just one of those things that when you watch it, you see why people refer to it as one of the greatest films ever made. So that is all I got for my favorite parts of the movie. And now we've come to the trivia provided by IMDb. And now we're here for the trivia. So, Andy and Red's opening chat in the prison yard, in which Red is throwing a baseball, took 9 hours to shoot. Morgan Freeman threw the baseball for the entire 9 hours without a word of complaint. He showed up for work the next day with his left arm in a sling. Now, there's speculation as to whether this is due to an actual injury or Morgan Freeman making the point that he didn't appreciate having to do this, throwing the baseball scene for 9 hours. It was a lot due to the inexperience of the director, Frank Darabont. The exteriors were filmed at a defunct Ohio State reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. The prison was in such poor condition that renovation had to be made prior to filming. However, most of the interiors were shot on a soundstage because they determined that it would be cheaper to build duplicates of the interiors rather than renovate the interiors of the prison. Morgan Freeman's favorite film of his own. Clint Eastwood, Harrison Ford, Paul Newman, Gene Hackman, Robert Redford, and Robert Duvall were considered for the part of Red. In the original novel, Red is a middle-aged white Irishman with graying red hair. However, Frank Darabont had always had Morgan Freeman in mind for the role because of his authoritative presence, demeanor, and deep voice. Red's reply, "Maybe it's because I'm Irish," to Andy's inquiry about his nickname was kept in the film as a joke. Also, it seems that Sidney Poitier was considered for the role of Red also, but it was Morgan Freeman's for the win. Jeff Bridges, Tom Hanks, Kevin Costner, Tom Cruise, Matthew Broderick, Nicolas Cage, Johnny Depp, and Charlie Sheen were all considered for the part of Andy Dufresne. Hanks turned it down because he was committed to Forrest Gump. Costner liked the script a lot, but was then embroiled in the filming of Waterworld. Interestingly, they really wanted Tom Hanks, but Tom Hanks was really into making Forrest Gump. And they were both up for the same Oscar, and Forrest Gump nearly swept the Oscars. But I think that had Tom Hanks been in this movie, The Shawshank Redemption, then I think that, because I think his star power was probably a little bit more significant than Tim Robbins. So maybe I'm thinking it probably would have worked. I mean, any of these actors would have worked. To be totally honest, at the time, Matthew Broderick was super hot. Nicolas Cage was making some fire films. Jeff Bridges, Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise really wanted the part, but you got Tim Robbins, and Tim Robbins knocked it out of the park. Stephen King never cashed his $5,000 checks for the right to the film. Several years after the movie came out, King got out the check, framed, and mailed it back to Frank Darabont with a note inscribed, "In case you ever need bail money, love, Steve." Adjusted for inflation, that's $9,378 from 1993. King sold the rights to his novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption for only $5,000 out of friendship with Frank Darabont. They had become friends when Darabont adapted a short story of King's called The Woman in the Room. King has a policy of stating that any filmmaker can adapt his short stories for $1, and King was thoroughly impressed. They maintained a pen pal relationship and didn't actually meet until Darabont optioned Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. To prepare for his role as Andy Dufresne, or Dufresne, I think they do say Dufresne. To prepare for his role as Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins actually spent some time in solitary confinement. He was asked to be locked in solitary for a while and get a feel for it, although he knew his experience wouldn't be the same because it was voluntary. Frank Darabont watched Goodfellas every Sunday while shooting this film and drew inspiration from it on using voiceover narration and showing the passage of time. The mugshots of a young-looking Red that are attached to his parole papers are actually pictures of Morgan Freeman's younger son, Alfonso Freeman. Alfonso had also had a cameo in the movie as the con shouting, fresh fish today, we reeling them in." A year after The Shawshank Redemption, he appeared as a fingerprint technician in another Morgan Freeman movie, Seven. Clancy Brown said he had received several offers from real-life corrections officers to work with him in order to make his portrayal of Captain Hadley more realistic. He turned down all because Hadley was an evil character, and he didn't want to misrepresent real corrections officers. So the reason Clancy Brown turned down any instructions from correctional officers because he didn't want to make them more realistic. He wanted to portray Captain Hadley as evil because Captain Hadley is an evil character, and he did an outstanding job. Although it's never directly stated in the film, Brooks is in prison for allegedly murdering his wife and daughter after a losing streak in poker. And I think I'm not sure why Red is in jail. I don't know if he killed his family members, but then you have the reason that that Andy Dufresne doesn't have anybody on the outside because his wife was killed and he didn't have any children. So yeah, it takes a lot. They have had a lot taken from them, is what I meant to say. They've had a lot taken from them, so there's nobody on the outside for them, for those characters. Despite the film's box office failure, Warner Brothers shipped 320,000 rental copies to the U.S. video stores, a figure a spokesman freely admitted was out of whack with the film's performance in theaters. The film became the most rented video of 1995 and one of the highest grossing video rentals of all time. The full title of the Stephen King novella, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, was not used because there was a perception in Hollywood that the film was actually going to be a biopic of Rita Hayworth. Indeed, Frank Darabont even received solicitation of audition requests from several actresses and supermodels and their agents about playing the lead. There's also a thing that I saw where one of the agents called and said, I read the script and I have a client who'd be great for Rita Hayworth. Now, Frank Darabont knows that this dude has not read the script because Rita Hayworth does not actually make she makes an appearance in the movie, but as a character on the film and as a poster, but not as actually an actress in the movie. It wasn't a biopic. So immediately, you know that the dude did not read the script. He's just trying to get it in for his client. This was Morgan Freeman's first time narrating a movie, thus, by his own admission, jumpstarting that element of his career, which raised his popularity even further. Usually, the narration was recorded before filming began, but was then played on the set to dictate the rhythm of each scene. Freeman recorded the guide track in an Iowa recording studio in only 40 minutes. However, there was a minor hiss on the track, which sound engineers in Los Angeles were unable to eradicate. Consequently, it had to be re-recorded in a proper studio. This time, it took 3 weeks. This was Morgan Freeman's first time narrating a movie, thus, by his own admission, jumpstarting that element of his career, which raised his popularity even further. Usually, the narration was recorded before filming began and was then played on the set to dictate the rhythm of each scene. Freeman recorded the guide track in an Iowa recording studio in only 40 minutes. However, there was a minor hiss on the track, which sound engineers in Los Angeles were unable to eradicate. Consequently, it had to be re-recorded in a proper studio. This time, it took 3 weeks. This was a thing that Frank Darabont did. He had Morgan Freeman record the narration before filming, which is highly unusual. This could be due to his inexperience making movies. In a close-up of Andy's hands loading the revolver in the opening scenes, the hands are actually those of Frank Darabont. Later in the film, while Andy carves his name into the cell wall, seen twice in the film, Darabont's hands are used again for the insert shot. These close-ups were filmed during post-production, notably because Darabont felt that only he could do exactly what he wanted in those close-ups. Tim Robbins once credited the movie as being a uniquely non-sexual love story between two men. What do they call it? A bromance. They call that a bromance now. Stephen King said that his original novella was a accumulation of all the memories he had from watching prison movies when he was a child. I did not know there were that many prison movies. At the end of the movie, there is a dedication to Alan Green. He was Frank Darabont's agent and also a close personal friend. He died just before the completion of the movie due to AIDS complications. In case you saw the dedication at the end of the movie and wondered who that person was. The opera song that Andy Dufresne plays over the loudspeaker is Canzonetta Salaria from Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. It was Tim Robbins' idea for Andy to turn up the volume of the record player in the scene. The scene that I get a lot of joy out of. This is the first IMDb title to have over 2 million votes. Oh, and this is what I alluded to earlier about the first poster that Andy got was Rita Hayworth. The second was Marilyn Monroe. The third was Raquel Welch, whose 1 million years BC from 1966 poster plays a significant role in the film, is a big fan of this movie. Rob Reiner loved Frank Darabont's script so much that he offered $2.5 million for the rights to the script so he could direct it. He wanted Harrison Ford and Tom Cruise to play Red and Andy respectively. Darabont seriously considered Reiner's offer, but ultimately decided that it was his chance to do something really great by directing the movie himself, and he even took a pay cut in order to be allowed to direct. And yeah, he did. The kid did good, but here's the thing. If Rob Reiner had directed it, even if he had directed it with the same actors that Darabont had chosen, it probably would have made a lot more money because people know who Rob Reiner is. People didn't know who Frank Darabont was. So it probably would have been the success that it should have been because it would have had a notoriety. Also, there's a thing that it's called, they had to change it to the Shawshank Redemption, obviously, because people were like, they were confused with Rita Hayworth's name being in the title. So it's called just the Shawshank Redemption, but it doesn't have any connection to Steven Spielberg. I mean, not Steven Spielberg. It doesn't have any connection to Stephen King. And they thought that it would confuse audiences because Stephen King is known for writing horror. So they didn't want to say, the Shawshank Redemption, a Stephen King story or anything like that, because they wanted, I guess they wanted to be fresh or free from Stephen King or whatever. They thought it would be better marketing, but that probably was a mistake. I think that if people had known from the get-go that this was based on the Stephen King story, then and being Stephen King being the stature that he was, in the 1990s, the mid 1990s, then it probably had a larger audience in the movie theater. But yeah, you live and learn. You live and learn. You got to take care. You got to take every advantage. In April of 2018, while a guest on NPR's It's Been a Minute with Sam Sanders, Tim Robbins talked about how often strangers tell him they love this movie. I'm proud of that film. Really proud of that film. I've talked to Morgan about this. It's unlike other films that people talk to you about. It's very important to people in a deep way. And it's beyond just liking the film. It's more profound than that. I've had people tell me that it shifted the way they think, that it brought them out of a depression, that it made them understand a deeper truth about themselves. That's a pretty cool thing to be involved in. And when people are telling you pretty much on a daily basis, you're my favorite movie of all time, that's a pretty cool bucket list thing to check off. I don't have to do that now in my life. In a May 2015 Wall Street article, the linguist Ben Zimmer reported the term bucket list was coined by Justin Zachman, the screenwriter for another Morgan Freeman movie, 2007's The Bucket List. The American Humane Society monitored the filming of scenes involving Brooks Crow. During the scene where he fed it a maggot, the AHS objected on the grounds that it was cruel to the maggot and required that they use a maggot that had died from natural causes. One was found and the scene was filmed. That is utterly ridiculous. I mean, that's what crows eat. Are they going to object to birds eating now? Are they going to object to fish eating other fish? Are they going to object to the Venus flytrap eating flies? Are they going to object to spiders eating birds? Because some spiders do eat birds. Are they going to object to that now? I don't. It's utterly ridiculous. It's kind of weird that they would have this type of objection. Anyways, finally, we have this. After the film gained popularity, Ted Turner sold the television rights to TNT, his own network, for much lower than normal for such a big film. Because it was so inexpensive to show, the film was broadcast on TNT extremely often. So if you had seen the Shawshank Redemption like 10 years ago, or like actually in the late 90s, if you ever seen it in the late 90s, then it was probably on TNT being played over and over again. That's it from the trivia. I hope you learned something. And now we'll talk about what the critics thought. Critics gave it a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. The audience score was 98%. In IMDb reviews, it has a 9.3 out of 10. This is one of the highest IMDb review that I've seen for any movie. It's gotten a lot of 10s. I guess this is one of the films that people are like, I'm giving this movie a 10. They were not afraid to give this movie a 10. I think a lot of it came from nostalgia, but still. And then, like, even on the Rotten Tomatoes side, very high scores. So, and as a result, as you might predict, it's on Rotten Tomatoes. It was kind of hard finding negative reviews, but I found some, and as you will see, don't make a lot of sense. So Janet Maslin from the New York Times wrote, without a single riot scene or horrific effect, it tells a slow, gentle story of camaraderie and growth with an ending that abruptly finds poetic justice in what has come before. Yeah, that sounds accurate to me. PJ Nabro of Patrick Nabro wrote, the problem with the film's fabulistic fluziness is that it also asks for investment in the harsh realities of its prison area to buy the later Andy and Red push for freedom. So he gets certain things fundamentally wrong about the movie. For one thing, what is fluziness? Is that a word? No, fabulistic is even a worse made up word. But he says it asks for an investment in the harsh realities of the prison arena to push for Andy's and Red's freedom. But that's not exactly true, because Red doesn't actually want to be free. It's like, it originally, when Red has not been in the prison for that very long, he was up for his first parole hearing. He did want to get out because he had not yet been fully institutionalized. He was eager to get out. He was trying to say all the right words to convince the parole board that he had been rehabilitated. But then as time goes on, as he gets more institutionalized, he's less enthralled with the idea of being free from the prison. He has decided that this is his life now, and he's actually afraid of being on the outside world. And nothing particularly bad happens to Red himself that makes him want to get out of prison. It's like the harsh realities is all suffered by Andy. And it's not so much that the prison is harsh, is that Andy is an innocent man. He's not supposed to be there. And what actually pushes his his drive to get out of prison. I mean, he wants to get out of prison all along. Apparently, as soon as he got that rock hammer, he started digging out. So it didn't take very long for him to want to get out of prison. He wanted to get out as soon as he got that rock. As soon as he discovered that he could dig a tunnel, he decided he wanted to get out. Because otherwise, had he not discovered that the walls were vulnerable in his cell, he would have just put up with it as much as he could, because he had 2 life sentences. He was never getting out. So, I mean, all you have to do is say it's prison. You have to prove that prison is harsh, right? You already just say the words and you already know it's a bad place, and you don't want to be there. These were different realities that Andy in particular, he had dealt with different realities than what other prisoners would have to deal with. Like other prisoners, if they found evidence that would exonerate them of their crime, I don't know if the warden would help them, but I don't think that the warden would actively try to prevent them from trying to prove their innocence. See, that's a reality that other prisoners don't really have to deal with. So no, I think this critique is a fundamental misunderstanding of the movie. So up next is David Kerr from the New York Daily News. He wrote, "This is an engaging, simple, good-hearted film with just enough darkness around the edges to give the contrast and relief to its glowing, benign view of human nature." Yeah, I'll go with that. I like that. I think that he has the right of it. Leonard Swartz from Palo Alto Weekly wrote, "The Shawshank Redemption continuously abandons plausibility in order to celebrate the triumph of hope over despair, of decency over cruelty, of justice over injustice." Plausibility? They're in prison. They're getting beaten. This sort of thing happens in prison. If you're actually paying attention to today's news, you see numerous examples of people dying in prison, and then the protests that happens as a result. So, no, I'm not seeing a plausibility problem with this movie. Finally, Betty Jo Tucker from Real Talk Movie Reviews wrote, "Top-notch performances, exceptional cinematography, and masterful direction combined to make this film something special indeed." And yep, I agree. Finally, The Shawshank Redemption is, as of this recording, available anywhere you can rent or buy movies. That's it for today. Next week, we have a chat about another great movie from yesteryear, Bloodsport. Follow us on Twitter, TikTok, at Backlook Cinema, or on Facebook or Instagram at Backlook Cinema Podcast, or if you're on Mastodon, Backlook Cinema at msdn.party. Don't forget that you can contact us at any time with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. One last time, if you like the show, then please help us grow. To do this, you can subscribe to the show, rate us, write a review on Spotify, Podchaser.com, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Believe me, it matters. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.